So here we are for another one of my in-depth model review videos. As usual, these are a couple of kits that I'm going to be starting to build soon, so I'll get these reviews done before I start the construction. We're going to start with the Accurate Miniatures Dautless SBD-5 Dauntless. Now, as you can see, I don't have a box for this. I purchased this used, and it came in a Ziploc bag. But at the end of the day, it still has everything you need to complete the model. It does only have one set, I believe it's only one set of markings installed. This is a weird instruction booklet. Anyways, we'll start looking through some of the kit plastic. I haven't opened the packages yet. You know what? I said I don't plan on it, but I will. We'll start with an X-Acto knife. Start with the fuselage sprues. So standard with Accurate Miniatures, they have very, very well molded, accurate parts. They can be quite fiddly at times. You usually end up kind of fighting with a few spots in the model to make everything work right, just because of how in-depth and detailed things are. But on the main fuselage sprue itself, as you can see, I'll zoom in here just a little bit. You can see the detailing on the kit is beautiful. Panel lines are, I mean, it's a model, so they're not going to be perfect, but they're definitely quite small, quite detailed. Lots of little things in terms of like handles and tie downs and latches and everything. There's some really nice little, the hinge panel line in here. Some really nice little detail in there. You've also got your armor plate for the seat. I believe that is the forward fuselage for the cockpit, and where the guns would be. The cowling, there's this is the forward fuselage kind of firewall area, and then the forward part, top of the cowling where the machine gun troughs are, as well as some of the bits and bobs for the cockpit and the rear 230 cal machine guns. Inside the cockpit, you'll see there isn't a lot of molded on detail, and that's just because a lot of the detail will be added after the fact. One minor thing that's a little annoying is just the fact that the tail wheel is molded in the way it is. It means that getting that seam cleaned up in and around all these little tiny bits are going to be a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. But I feel like at the end of the day, it won't be quite as hard as others. This little sprue here would have had your prop. Clearly it's popped off. But your prop is here, as well as some, I believe that's the gun sight. I'm not sure. I think that might be the dive bombing sight. I don't know for sure. I'm just going off memory. I have to look at the instructions, as well as your little radar antennas for the late war radar, and the wiring harness for the front of your engine. That's pretty standard with the radial engines from Accurate Miniatures. All of these wiring harnesses come as a separate piece that plop onto the front. A little tiny bit out of scale, but it's a lot more detailed and easier to do than running all of those individual little wires that a lot of people like to do in the aftermarket, or using photo etch. If you want to go that route, you can snip it all off and do it. If you don't, all the pieces are already there. So we'll move on to the next little bit that has the wings. So the wings themselves come on a completely separate sprue. You can see there's a lot, again, of detail in here. All the little openings in the lower fuselage where the bomb cradle would be, and all the access panels, all of them are open. The bits here for the interior of the flaps. Again, some nice molded in detail. You can't even feel much of that with your finger. You can catch it with your nail, but using the actual surface of your finger, none of that really registers, which shows you how fine those panel lines are. Not a lot of detail inside the wheel well, but in reality the Dauntless didn't have a lot of detail inside the wheel well, so that's not too far off from how it would be. But otherwise, as you can see, there's quite a bit of nice surface detail. The shape looks more or less accurate, and looks like it'll go together quite nicely. Included also in the same baggie as the wings are a lot of these bits. Also, that includes your dive flaps. They do mold on all of the detail here, the holes. For your dive flaps, both your outer ones that go up and down, and then your center one, which is just a lower flap. So the way that the flaps worked, if you're coming to land the aircraft, your lower surfaces would come down like standard flaps. If you win a dive for the dive bomb, the flaps would come down farther, and your upper ones would open as well. So your wings would have a double one, and then your lower center flap would still come down. So you have all the flaps. Again, I'm not entirely sure what all of this is because I haven't been looking through the instructions. I'm going to guess this is the flap mechanism for the central flaps, and these are part of the mechanisms for the wing flaps. You've also got some stuff for the cockpit, some bulkheads, some ammo chutes. I believe this is part of the rear cockpit area, landing gear. Here, part of your sidewalls for inside the cockpit. You can see how kind of fiddly these get when you got to get in there and trim off all of these extra little plastic nubs, and how easy it'd be to break something off or kind of mix up, you know, snap something really tiny trying to move things around. There's footrests as well as, actually that might be some more flap mechanism, not entirely sure. The rudder pedals as well. So you can really see how fiddly some of this can get when you are trying to work in and around all of that. So you have to be very, very careful with these. It's very easy to snap pieces off. But at the end, it does definitely show a lot of detail that you wouldn't normally see in one of these kits, especially from, you know, this came out in the mid-90s. This was kind of unheard of in mid-90s modeling. One of the reasons why Accurate Miniatures didn't last as long as a lot of people hoped was because they put so much money into the engineering of the kits and all that stuff that the costs they were selling the kits for, they couldn't recoup their costs of development, and then the company ended up, now again I'm going off of memory here so it might be a bit wrong, but from what I remember it had to do with that fact that they were investing a lot of money in the engineering side of things and the development of it, and they weren't selling the kits for enough money effectively to recoup their costs, and the business eventually went under. So here on this sprue here, you've got the tail planes. You can see the other two have broken off, but you have your tail planes. I believe this is some more mechanisms for the wing flaps, seats. You know, I'm not even sure what those are. I would assume those are probably the landing gear doors. Your control stick, bombs, wing bombs, pitot tube, flare gun, which again, how often do you see a separate flare gun in a 148 scale aircraft kit? So that's interesting. Radio work, antennas, bomb racks, and I don't know what those are. I would say probably part of the landing gear or possibly part of the flap system. Again, just going off of what I'm looking at, not looking at instructions yet. The final sprue, and of course I just made an absolute mess all over my desk because I am not paying attention. The final sprue has a lot of the other kind of fiddly cockpit bits here. So you got the cockpit floor, which I'm pretty sure is just the top of the wing, as well as the radio / gunner's compartment. There's your radial engine. Again, you can see how that wiring harness would just fit on the front of that and give you all the detail. Don't even know and don't hazard a guess. I would say it's probably part of the rear gunner's compartment seat. Some rudder pedal foot tracks. Those I would assume are the machine guns for inside the instrument panel that spit out the front of the nose. I believe these are more, that's the bomb cradle. These are all probably part of the rear gunner's mount. There's the drop tail hook, I should say, exhaust stacks. Probably some more inside the cockpit bits. Don't even want to hazard a guess. Landing gear doors probably or something. And then you've got your main wheels here. You have two different types of wheels, which is always nice. Full round as well as the weighted look for when they're sitting on the wheels. And you got your different wheel hubs in here as well. So again, quite a bit of detail, but you can see how it'd be very easy to like snip this and crack and break one of these right down the middle. They did tend to have a bit of a brittle plastic, if memory serves. It was very easy to snap through the middle of one of these when you're trying to cut with a cutting plier. You'd snap this or snap that or snap that. You had to be very careful when you trimmed off the sprue where you trimmed and how far away you trimmed so that you didn't end up causing damage to the plastic parts themselves. Put all this back in the bag. And then moving on to the clear parts. I'm not going to take these out of the little baggie because I don't want to get them all scratched. But again, you can see you've got the forward canopy, the windscreen. You've got your rear windscreen where the machine gun would point out of. And then over here, no, you know what? I take that back. Those are the two different forward windscreens. There's one for when you have the telescoping dive bombing sight and one for when you don't. So these are both forward windscreens. It just depends on which model you build, whether it has that little telescope sight that sticks out the front of the nose. And then for the rear cockpit, you have it all as a single piece, or you have them all separate. So you can choose to put it all in one shot, put the gear up and put it on a stand or hang it, or you can put the wheels down and have the cockpit sections open kind of in whatever orientation you want. You also have the instrument panel that comes clear. Again, if memory serves with this, there's a decal that goes on the back, and then you paint the forward around the instrument panels, and you can see through the clear dial and see the instrument face. If memory serves, I'll have to get the instruction sheet out here in a bit, and we will confirm that, and vice versa, the instructions will actually show us that. Again, considering this model now is probably almost, I'd say 25 years old, 26 years old, it is impressive that they were putting this kind of detail into the kit that long ago and still selling the kits for a relatively, reasonable price at the time. They weren't drastically overpriced, all things considered. And look at that. That's how easy it is to lose a piece. Just found a little piece of it sitting on my model desk. Deal with that later. Okay, so moving on to the instructions. Like I said, this is a bit of a weird one because you can see how it's supposed to be like a booklet style, but it was photocopied. So it's on this weird kind of big single sheet, and you kind of have to figure out what you're looking at. But as I said, this is the SBD-5, so it is a later version of the, let's get you out of here a little bit, of the Dauntless. So again, the way that Accurate Miniatures has their instructions, there's this little sort of preamble that tells you kind of what you're looking for and how to follow the instructions, a list of paints you need, as well as the different cross referencing for all the different brands, so you can make sure you got the right color that you're using. And then you move into the instructions, and it actually tells you down here for each step what part B1 gets painted fuselage interior. So you find B1, you find E19, E19 is painted interior green. So it goes through and labels all the part numbers and tells you what color to paint them, and it also tells you what order to assemble things are. And believe it or not, in most instructions you can kind of mix and match and play around. With Accurate Miniatures, following this order can be very, very important because of the way pieces overlap. It's very easy to not follow and put one piece before the other, and then all of a sudden the next piece won't fit right because you put them in the wrong order. So it is always good to look at these, especially any Accurate Miniatures kit you have. Follow this build order. If you notice you can mix and match and move things around and moving them helps you, do it. But don't just go off a picture. You have to read this because it is very easy to get yourself into a corner when it comes to Accurate Miniatures. So step one, we're installing all the interior bits to the cockpit, bulkheads, side panels, and radios, all that kind of stuff. It all gets installed on step one. So step two, you're assembling the main cockpit floor. Kind of shows you here how these parts are all supposed to be overlapped and fed through each other, as well as the instrument panel. And there you go. See, there is a decal that that goes in and shows you the instruments on the back, and then you have to paint around. So if you read through, it'll say, carefully line the dials so they may be seen from the front of the panel. The front of the panel may now be painted in the usual way, and the raised dials highlighted by dry brushing. So it does show you how to apply the decal and paint around it and make it all so the dials pop. But you just got to be very careful how you do it and make sure you don't mess that up. Moving down here, you have some more area. You've got more of the control sticks are going in, the gunner's pedals. You can see here how all those little bits that I wasn't sure what they were for, you can now see how they all kind of go into place and match everything up. So a lot of little tiny fiddly bits you all got to assemble in there and make sure it all fits together. So it takes a bit of effort to make sure all of that goes together properly. Step three, you're installing radio racks and seats and the final little bits into the cockpit. When did that go in? See, that's interesting. Part of the, oh no, never mind, it's molded onto the fuselage. Ha, there we go. Okay, step four is your turret ring. So part of those parts that I thought were part of the flap mechanisms turn out that's the lower half of the rear turret ring. So this all gets assembled in step four. You also see there's some decals for the seat belts for this kit. So that all goes together. Step five, you actually glue the floor into the cockpit, and then the cockpit onto the lower wings, and all that aligns everything together to make sure that everything fits properly. and then you're ending up putting the upper half of the wings onto the lower half of the wings. It also shows you where to open up the hole if you want to use those little radar antennas. So that happens here. Step 6 is your horizontal stabs as well as your tail hook. Pretty simple. Step 7 is the whole nose. I feel like this can get pretty fiddly pretty quick if you're not careful, because you have two halves of the forward fuselage that have to go together, line up with the fuselage itself. Then there's this upper panel that pops down on top of it. The machine guns get mounted underneath. So that you've basically got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts that all have to align perfectly. So that could be a little bit of a misalignment issue if you're not careful with your assembly. So I recommend you do a lot of dry fitting here before you start gluing parts together. Just slamming glue into, especially if you just glued these two halves together, set them aside, and then tried to mount them to the fuselage, you'd probably have misalignments. Whereas if you glued these together and to the fuselage at the same time, probably have a better alignment. Or even glue these to the forward fuselage, if possible, before gluing the fuselage down to the wing. But again, then you're messing up alignment with the wing. So this is how you kind of have to follow the instructions and be very careful how it all assembles. And over here for the cowling, again, you've got a 3-piece cowling, so it's very easy to get some misalignment happening there. So you want to make sure everything is aligned properly and it doesn't start to shift after you glue. If you glue it all together, it's lined up, you put it down, and then things can sag, and then it'll dry out of round or out of shape, and it won't fit. So be very careful when you're assembling that kind of stuff. Step 8 is your landing gear. So you've got the main, your landing gear, the wheels, the hubs, the door, everything goes in place. Probably wouldn't be too hard to build this with the gear up if you did choose to do that. You just kind of have to cut off the lower part of the door. Maybe probably have to do that, and then play with the angles to get the gear doors in properly. But I mean, at the end of the day, it wouldn't be too hard if you do want to do the way you want. Also, it does say it's a self-alignment gear, so you put all of the parts of the gear together first, following these instructions. And when you put the gear leg in, everything should line up in the proper order. If you try to do things out of order, you might not get perfect alignment. So follow the instructions, see if and when you can start to modify. If not, this is the way to do it. Step 9 is your bombs. There's a 1,000-pound bomb that goes in the center bomb rack, and then you got 100-pound bombs on the wings. So you can go ahead and that would be very easy to install after painting, for example. You don't have to do that right at this point. But that is the step for the bombs. Step 10 is the dive brakes. Again, you could probably do these after the fact. If you wanted to paint everything and then glue these on later. It does show you that they could be positioned in 3 positions, completely closed, set up for landing where only the lower ones are down, or fully deployed for dive bombing. So follow your instructions, and they'll show you the 3 different: closed, fully open, or landing. And it'll show you what parts and what order to do things to make it work. Step 11, you have some little bits of the cockpit, your canopy defroster, and some other stuff here gets put in just before the canopy goes on. And then step 12 is the canopy. So again, you can use your full-length canopy, or you can use your sections depending on how you want to assemble things. And then step 13 is the rear gun. You can then put it all together. Again, you can play with this order a little bit. For example, when I paint this, I'll probably use this full cockpit in place to cover the interior, paint it. I'll mask these cockpits separately, paint them separately, pop this off, and then glue your canopies on after the fact. And that saves you from having to do some kind of wonky masking and everything to make it work. So that's that. And the final bit, it's just your little antennas, your exhaust, your pitot tube and whatnot. Your propeller can all go on at the end. And as I said, there is only one marking for this kit. I say that, you know what, hold on. There's one set of instructions here. Yeah, see, it says there's 2, but I only see 1 in the instructions. It looks like it just tells you to use 2 different codes. I will pull out the decal sheet at this point. So yeah, the decal sheet, it does come with quite a bit of extra stuff. For example, this is part of your map table. When you do the map there, your instruments, wing walks, some of your propeller markings, and stencils and whatnot. So there are two. You can either do aircraft 45 or aircraft 41. And you do have all the different aircraft markings to do that. It doesn't change much. So you get S20A or S20B, which just changes your serial number. So the main markings stay the same. It just depends on whether you do aircraft 45 or aircraft 41. So both of these aircraft were lost during operations during the, let's see if I read this, Operation Galvanic, the Marine landings on Tarawa. So both aircraft in the kit were lost during the invasion of Tarawa. And these are the only Dash 5s that were assigned to the USS Lexington at the time. So it does give you the tritone, white underneath, intermediate blue in the middle, and then the dark blue on the white. I do believe I did one of my Corsairs up in that scheme. So it'd be interesting to kind of have that ability to have the two, you know, similar painted aircraft side by side on my shelf. I'll probably end up doing this the same way I did my other dive bombers, my Stuka and my A36, and have it posed in the dive with the flaps out. And similar to the Stuka, probably have the bomb kind of swinging down in the process of being in a dive. I kind of like that dynamic. That, or I'll put it on the ground and open it all up and have it with my Corsair. Not entirely sure yet where I'm going to go with that. I'll have to kind of figure that out as I go. But that being said, it's not really necessarily part of my review of the kit. But that is the review. So, I mean, it's pretty much the only 1/48 scale Dauntless model out there. I believe this has been reboxed by a number of different kit manufacturers over the year. This is probably the be-all and end-all of 1/48 scale Dauntless kits. It's definitely a good kit. And like I said, I got this one as a used kit in a Ziploc bag, but all the parts are there, and it still serves, you know, a purpose. It still has what you need to do to build it. So definitely recommend this for anybody who's looking to do a Dauntless kit. It is Accurate Miniatures. It is a little bit more difficult. I would definitely say you need to have a little bit of skill level to put this together. It wouldn't be a beginner level kit, but it's not that difficult to assemble. There's no photo etch. There's no kind of crazy little bits. It's just take your time, follow the instructions, and you should end up with a very decent looking model. So there we go. That is my kit review for the Accurate Miniatures SBD-5 Dauntless. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching, guys, and as always, if you are interested in any of the content you see, you can access my website at www.seans-aviation.com. You can see all the latest pictures of aircraft and museums and the build logs of all of my current models and past models on that site. And if you're interested in any of this content, please click the subscribe button here on YouTube to follow more. Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.